Wember Broadcasting. Okay, Chair, we're now live.
Thank you. So welcome to this virtual planning control meeting that's being held with members and officers at various locations, communicating via audio and video online. There's also an opportunity for the public and press to listen and view proceedings via our YouTube channel. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work and to confirm that members, officers and registered speakers are in attendance. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members, officers and registered speakers. Please note that the meeting is being streamed live onto YouTube and recorded via Zoom. I'm just going to undertake a roll call. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant hasn't joined yet, I believe, but she said she was on her way in. So Morgan Derbyshire, Councillor Morgan Derbyshire sent his apologies, and this evening Councillor Michael Muir is subbing for him. Councillor Hewson.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Levitt.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Nguala.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Prendergast.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Tyson.
I'm here.
Thank you. I have seen Councillor Bryant join. If you could just confirm. I think you're muted at the time.
I'm here.
Great. Thank you. Okay. In terms of officers, I have Simon Ellis.
Present.
Thank you. Tom Allington.
Here.
Thank you. Nurineta Katavu.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nigel Smith.
Present.
Thank you. I think that was Nigel. Could you just say again?
Yeah. Present.
Thank you very much. William Edwards is on the IT. I have two member advocates this evening, Councillor Ian Moody.
I'm present.
Thank you. And Councillor Richard Thake.
I'm present, thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of Hertfordshire County Council officers, I have Russell Monk.
I'm here, present.
Thank you. Kate Marr.
Yeah, here.
Thank you. And Roger Taylor.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the public, I have Steve Woodward.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Chris Watts.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Tracy Puttock.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Sophie Stocker.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. That's the roll call completed. I'll just go through the introductory bits. Extracts on the remote/partly remote meetings protocol are included with the agenda. And as always, the full version is available on the council's website, should you wish to read it. And members are requested to ensure they are familiar with the protocol. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? None showing, Chair, so over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to item 2, apologies for absence. I believe we've already recorded Councillor Derbyshire and Councillor Muir is subbing for Councillor Derbyshire. Item 3, the minutes from the 10th of February and the 24th of February. I'd like to propose that we take these as read and approve them as a true record of those minutes of those planning control meetings held on those dates. Can I have a seconder? Daniel, thank you for seconding. Are there any comments? Anybody find any inaccuracies that they want to ask about? No, in which case can we go to the vote then?
So yes, members, if you use your blue hand to vote for the minutes. Okay, thank you. That's carried, I believe. Yes, that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So I authorise the committee member and scrutiny officer to apply my electronic signature and initials to those approved minutes. Thank you. Item 4, notification of any other business. There is none. Moving on to item 5, Chair's announcements. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be made available on mod.gov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. And then finally, to clarify matters for the registered speakers. So we have a one item agenda tonight, and there is a great deal of public interest in this item. And as a result, on this occasion, in accordance with the Constitution, I have allowed members of the public 10 minutes for each group of speakers. So 10 minutes for objectors, 10 minutes for supporters, and 10 minutes for member advocates. And I believe we have 2 speakers for each of those. So they'll have 5 minutes each. We will stick to that time limit. We've already given extra time, so we will stick to it. You'll get a warning when you're speaking to alert you that you have 30 seconds left. And then when we get to 5 minutes, I will ask you to stop. Please, can you respect that, because it's quite a long item tonight. So it's important that it makes it fair for everyone if we stick to those. So we've, as I say, it's a one item agenda. So we've allowed adequate time for this matter to be fully debated, and I'm looking forward to a full and informed debate conducted in a respectful manner. I'm aware that there are strong feelings about this application, and therefore I would ask you to show one another respect even when we disagree. Everyone will get their chance to speak, and I would like to ask members of the public and councillors to communicate their feelings in a respectful manner, as always. The other thing to say is about a comfort break. Because we've got a one item agenda, if we get past 8:30 and we haven't moved to debate, I'm going to have a short comfort break before we move into debate. So we'll see how we go. Because we can't obviously break in the middle of a debate. I've got Richard Thake. Councillor Thake, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It's apropos the time allowed. Fully understand the protocols here. I do understand that Councillor Ian Moody has a presentation which will exceed the 5 minutes, and I am absolutely happy, if you are, entirely your call, of course, to concede time to him, because my point will be literally take a minute to make.
Okay, that's fine. So between you have 10 minutes. So
thank you, Madam Chairman. I just thought I'd alert you to that, so that we didn't have to do it later on. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Thake. So 10 minutes between you. Okay, are there any questions on any of those announcements? I know it's a little bit different from usual. Okay. Item 6, public participation. There is none. Well, we have registered speakers for our item, but other than that, we have none. And so we'll move straight on to our agenda item number 7, which is land south of Heath Lane, Codicott, a residential development of 167 dwellings, use class C3, and associated works, including formal open space, internal road network, landscape enhancement, and creation of accesses from Heath Lane and St Albans Road, and the demolition of 66 St Albans Road as amended by drawings received 1st and 6th of November 2018, 17th and 18th of December 2018, and 3rd of April 2019. Before we go any further, regarding declarations of interest, I believe that Councillor Moody is acting as a member advocate. So my understanding is he can stay. Oh, he can stay for this part, but he needs to be removed for the debate. So are you?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Okay, you're aware of that. That's brilliant. Thank you. So I'm going to invite our officer to present. We also have other officers in attendance from Hertfordshire County Council. And I just want to say that when we come to the questioning of speakers and questions to our officer, can we please address all questions in the first instance to our case officer, Tom Allington, and he may then call on other experts to help answer those questions. But if we can, in the first instance, if we can address any questions to him. So I think that's all I need to say. And I'm going to hand over now to our Planning Officer Tom Allington to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Will, could you just bring up the first slides, please? As members will be aware, my committee report is quite lengthy, as it's a complex case. I also have a number of updates to provide, so do please bear with me. There might be some time. Just before I provide updates, as Councillor Brown mentioned, we do have some officers joining us tonight, so I just want to mention them first. We have Nigel Smith from the NHDC Local Plan and Policy team. From County, we have Roger Evans from the Highways Department. And we have Russell Monk from the Growth and Infrastructure team and Kate Marr from Children's Services, who are both here regarding the expansion of the Codicott Primary School and how it relates to this site and this application. Okay, in terms of updates, my first update, I'll refer you to paragraph 4.3.150 of my report. That refers to the local plan main modifications, which at the time of drafting my report hadn't been received. I can confirm that the inspector's schedule of further main modifications was received on the 10th of March, and these were put on the council's website on the 11th of March. As per paragraph 4.3.151 of the committee report, the now received modifications do not propose any fundamental changes to the council's positions on the key issues of housing need, the approach to site selection, and the use and release of sites presently in the Greenbelt in order to achieve the housing need. Just to clarify, the main modifications are the inspector's opportunity to make changes to the local plan which he sees as necessary to make it sound, and the inspector has not included any modifications which remove this site CD5. My second update is regarding consultation responses. Since the committee report was published, approximately 59 further public objections have been received. These include further responses from Codicott Parish Council, from Save Rural Codicott, together with a letter from Richard Buxton Solicitors on their behalf. And a second letter was also received from the solicitors earlier this afternoon. In addition, a further letter of objection has been received from Stephen Hartland MP. In my view, the matters raised in the 59 objections, these remain summarised within 3.20 to 3.32 of the committee report. My third update is regarding a discrepancy in the report regarding a section 106 contribution towards the upgrade and improvement of existing bus stops on the High Street. At paragraph 4.3.81 of the report, it refers to a figure of £56,000, whereas the correct figure, the correct agreed to figure, is actually stated in the table towards the end of the report, and it's £76,000. My fourth and final update is regarding an email members will have received from Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust earlier this afternoon. Since receiving that email, I've spoken with Herts Ecology, our statutory consultee on these matters, who have provided an objective response, which I've circulated to members. In summary, the application has indeed been subject to a biodiversity impact calculator. A marginal net gain is demonstrated on site with section 106 contributions towards further off-site mitigation to meet the DEFRA target of 10% net gain. Both of these have been agreed by Herts Ecology. Furthermore, whilst the ecological survey is now more than 2 years old, Herts Ecology advise that it is sufficient, given the relatively low ecological value of the site, and the approach taken is reasonable and proportionate to the value of the site, and to enable a robust determination to be made. Herts Ecology also advise that the buffers to hedgerows is sufficient with regard to the proposals, and that the 12-metre buffer in the emerging plan is, well, they refer to it as more of an aspiration rather than a requirement, and most hedgerows would have suitable buffers in any case. Lastly, Herts Ecology have actually recommended an amendment to my report and have suggested an additional condition be added, which I will read as follows. Prior to the commencement of development, an ecological walkover survey shall be conducted to assess the potential for protected species such as reptiles, amphibians or badgers, which may have moved onto the site depending on its condition. Any necessary further surveys or works may be needed to ensure such species are not harmed will be undertaken accordingly. That concludes my updates. I can now start my presentation. Will, if you could please move to the next slide, the location plan. Excuse me. So the site is located at the southwestern edge of Codicot, situated between Heath Lane and St Albans Road. The site is approximately 10.8 hectares in area and is made up of a group of arable fields. The site includes a number of public footpaths and rights of way, including footpath 14, which runs north-south from St Albans Road, and footpath 15, which runs east-west through the site. The application also includes number 66 St Albans Road, an existing residential property on the northwest side of the road. Whilst the site is allocated in the emerging North Herts local plan as housing site CD5, importantly, it remains located in the Greenbelt. Will, if you could just go down to the next slide, please. Here we have an aerial photograph. This is an extract from the submitted design access statement showing an aerial photograph of the village and the site located there at the southwest side. And Will, if you could please scroll through, I think we've got some photographs. So here, this is on St Albans Road. So that's number 66. And this is the track which runs alongside number 66 leading to the site. This is the field which would be gifted to the county in terms of the school expansion towards the eastern part of the site. Here you can see the public footpath, I think it's 15 on the right hand side of that photo there, and here we're looking across the fields in a sort of southwesterly direction towards the Mimram Valley. Scroll down. This is again taken from the footpath looking a southwesterly direction across to the Mimram Valley, across the central part of the site. Will, sorry, if you could just slow down. Sorry, Will, could you go back up again? Thank you. This field is the northwest corner of the site. So this is looking north towards Heath Lane. If we could just go down to the next one. And then this is Heath Lane, looking in a westerly direction out of the village. And then you can see that gate towards the centre of the photograph is the site. If we could just carry on scrolling down, please, Will. Okay, that's the proposed site layout. If you can just go back up again a couple. This application is seeking full permission for the erection of 167 dwellings with associated vehicular access from Heath Lane and St Albans Road. The access from St Albans Road would require the demolition of number 66, which was in that first photograph. The proposals include associated road network around the site, which would link the two access points, and the site would include formal open space, landscaping, green corridors, a play park and drainage systems. It would include 40% affordable units, and both affordable and market units would range from 1-bedroom flats to 5-bed detached houses with a good mix across the site. Most of the dwellings would be 2 stories, although there would be 6 units which would be 2.5 stories. The site would also include 2 blocks of apartments located toward the eastern end of the site, and these would be the tallest buildings as part of the proposal, measuring approximately 10.3 metres in height. However, these would still be 2 stories. Will, if you could please just scroll down. We have here a number of cross sections and street scenes. This shows some of the street scenes in the eastern part of the site. So you can see on the third one there, one of the apartment blocks. If you just scroll down to the next one. This shows some more cross sections. These are some of the streets surrounding the open space and the leap, which will be located around the centre of the site. And I think we've got one more. And again, these are some cross sections along some of the streets in the northwest corner of the site. I think we have a couple more, please, Will, if you keep scrolling. This is a zoom-in vignette of the St Albans Road access. So this is what it would look like with landscaping either side of it. Obviously, it'd be quite wide because it would include the demolition of number 66. And I think we've got one more if we go down. Again, this is the leap. This is the park, which is proposed at the central open space. Well, if you could just scroll up a few slides, back up a few slides towards the, and just leave it on the proposed site plan. Thank you. Key to any decision on this application is the planning balance between the harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm, balanced against any public benefits which may or may not amount to very special circumstances. In terms of the harm, clearly the site is inappropriate. Whilst this site is allocated for housing in the emerging local plan, as we are all well aware, the local plan has not yet been adopted, and so the site is located within the Greenbelt. The proposals clearly represent inappropriate development, which by definition is harmful to the Greenbelt and which attracts substantial weight. In addition, the introduction of 167 dwellings on what is currently open fields would result in a significant reduction to openness in the Greenbelt, which is also afforded substantial weight. The harm to visual openness also carries substantial weight. Overall, the loss of the existing open land to built development resulted in limited to moderate harm to the 5 purposes of the Greenbelt, as listed under paragraph 133 of the NPPF, and this is mainly with regard to the purpose of safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. However, this additional harm attracts substantial weight. In terms of other harm, with regard to the impact on the setting of the village of Codicot, it is considered that the proposal is of high quality design with a good layout which responds to its location and setting, with suitable densities and with a significant amount of green space, including large open areas, green corridors and tree-lined roads. However, whilst the development is well designed and laid out, it would inevitably result in the loss of some of the rural setting of the existing village. And so to some extent, there would be an adverse impact on the character and setting of the existing village. In terms of the impact on heritage assets, it is considered there would be no impact or harm to the Codicot Conservation Area. However, as outlined in my report, a small degree of harm is identified to the setting of listed buildings at Codicot Bottom Farm and also to the setting of Ayot House Registered Parks and Gardens located to the west. This harm is considered to be at the lower end of the spectrum, and although great weight is attached to that harm, this would be clearly outweighed by the public benefits of the proposed scheme, which I will come on to. I now turn to the impact on the wider landscape. Will, sorry, if you could just skim down about 5 slides past the ones we've already seen. We'll come to, that's the one, sorry. Here we have some extracts from the landscape and visual impact assessment. And these provide some photo montages of one of the viewpoints to the west of the site from the Mimram Valley. So this first slide shows us the view as it exists. And you'll see that Codicot isn't overly visible. You can just about see some dwellings on the right-hand side there, which I believe are on Dark Lane or St Albans Road. If we move to the next slide, you'll make out the outline of the proposal on the horizon there. Excuse me. So this shows the development in place, and it's clearly visible and relatively intrusive in the landscape. If we just move down to the next slide. The next slide shows us the development at, shall we say, year 10. So when it's been in place for 10 years, once the structural landscaping has fully matured and grown up. The proposed development will be largely screened from surrounding views to the west and from the Mimram Valley by this point. As such, I consider there will be at least moderate harm in the short term in terms of impact on the wider landscape. But over the longer term, this would be reduced to limited harm. This harm is afforded moderate weight in the overall balance. Will, if you could just slide back up to these, the slide of the proposed site plan again, please. It's acknowledged that, as with most planning applications for residential development, that the issues surrounding impacts on highway network access and parking are particularly contentious, and concerns relating to these feature in many of the objections received on this application. I acknowledge that there are existing issues of congestion through Codicot and along the B656 High Street, particularly during rush hour and peak times of the day. However, it's noted that Hertfordshire County Council Highways do not object to this application. Paragraph 109 of the NPPF sets a high bar in terms of justifying refusal on highway grounds, stating development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there will be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. It is also noted that the proposals include for a significant 106 contributions and mitigation measures, including towards the improvement of bus services, upgrades and improvements to existing bus stops, the submission of a travel plan, which would seek a modal shift away from use of the private car, and a car club scheme on site. Whilst the highway impacts do not represent a reason for a refusal in its own right, in my view, I acknowledge that it is inevitable that new residents would make use of the private car, potentially adding to existing issues of congestion. Whilst this would not amount to a severe impact in highway terms, it would result in some minor harm which is afforded limited weight. Lastly, in terms of the harm and the other harm of the scheme, before I move on to matters in favour of the development, there are several environmental considerations to take into account, which I'll summarise. It is found that the proposed development would have a small net benefit in terms of ecology and biodiversity in the longer term through a small net gain on site, and a Section 106 contribution has been agreed for further off-site mitigation. However, there would be short-term loss and disturbance to ecology and wildlife, at least until mitigation and replacement planting was established. The proposal would have a neutral impact in terms of drainage and flooding, in terms of archaeology, land contamination and air quality, all of which had not received objections from the relevant statutory consultees, and all are subject to conditions. The proposal would result in small adverse impacts in terms of the residential amenity of existing residents. However, this would only be in the short term during the construction of the site. In addition, whilst the land is not of the highest quality, it would at least result in loss of some agricultural land. Therefore, in the overall planning balance, the proposals cause a small level of environmental harm, which I attribute limited weight. I now turn to matters considered to be in favour of the proposed development and the potential for very special circumstances. Just to reiterate, paragraph 144 of the NPPF states that very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Will, if you could just go back up to the location plan. The first of these relates to Codicote Primary School. As required under policy CD5, the emerging local plan, this application would also be associated with the transfer of the land to the east of footpath 14, shown there outlined in blue, to Hertfordshire County Council to enable the expansion of Codicote Primary School from a one form of entry school to a two form of entry school. The school serves the village of Codicote and the surrounding area and is in high demand, with over 80 total applications in recent years compared to the 30 places available. The land in question would provide a new outdoor playing field space to replace the existing, and the expansion of the school was granted planning permission at County Development Control Committee on the 24th September 2020. Over recent years, Herts County Council has worked with the school to agree temporary expansions on an annual basis to accommodate the excess demand from Codicote Village. However, in 2019, it was agreed that it is no longer possible to provide additional capacity in this way, as there are no further options to provide temporary expansion. The next nearest school is 2 miles away. It is acknowledged that this is likely to be an ongoing issue in years to come, with children in the village not able to get a place at the school. One of the reasons this application is being recommended to Planning Committee prior to the adoption of the emerging local plan is to seek to secure the school expansion as soon as possible, likely in September 2022. If the application is delayed until the emerging local plan is adopted, then the school expansion will be delayed at least a further year until 2023. National planning policy deliberately promotes a very positive policy framework for education. It is considered that by enabling the expansion of the primary school, which otherwise is not possible, to meet the existing and future unmet needs of the village, the proposed development will result in a significant benefit to the village and to the wider community, to which I attach very substantial weight. Will, if you could just go back to the proposed site plan. The next consideration, which weighs very strongly in favour of the application, is that the proposals will make an important contribution of 167 residential units towards the council's significant 5-year housing land supply deficit. The council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, and at the time of writing the report, the latest figure for decision-making purposes stands at 2.2 years as of April last year, which is a significant and serious deficit. The council is also presently unable to meet the requirements of the government's housing delivery test. The government's latest housing delivery test results were published in February 2021, so only last month, and these show the council delivered 36% of the homes considered necessary under this measure. And this result was actually the 4th lowest figure of almost 300 local authorities across the country. Because of this, the council must produce a housing delivery action plan. And the action plan agreed by Cabinet in June 2020 recommended that it may now be appropriate to determine some applications on local plan greenbelt sites in advance of local plan examination conclusion. The proposed 167 residential units is broadly in accordance with the indicative figure of 140 homes as outlined under policies HS1 and CD5 of the Emerging Local Plan. The proposals would deliver a significant quantum and range of market housing, which would contribute towards the need in the district, and so this should be afforded very substantial weight. The proposed development would also be in accordance with policy HS2, as 40% of the proposed development would comprise affordable units, which equates to a total of 67 units. Again, in light of the low level of provision in the district and the undersupply over a number of years, this aspect of the proposal should be given very substantial weight in favour of the proposals. Moving on to the third key aspect in favour of the proposals is the allocation of this site in the Emerging Local Plan under policy CD5. The plan examination is now in an advanced stage, and at the end of the November and December hearings, the inspector undertook to write to the council by the end of January 2021 if he had any fundamental concerns regarding the plan. He also made it clear he would not progress to main modifications if there remained concerns or deficiencies with the fundamentals of the local plan, and that he would not submit any modifications he was not happy with, or would only submit those he considered necessary for the soundness of the plan. As per my report and my updates I provided previously, the council has not received a letter raising any concerns regarding the fundamentals of the plan, namely the housing need figures, the site selection process, and the release of Greenbelt in order to achieve these housing numbers. Furthermore, I reiterate that the main modifications are the inspector's opportunity to make the changes he deems necessary. I note that during the past 4 years of examination, as part of the recent modifications, the inspector has not instructed the council to remove this site or any other site from the plan. As such, whilst it is acknowledged that we do not have interim findings from the inspector regarding the exceptional circumstances test, in my view, the publication of the schedule of main modifications logically provides a strong indication that this site will remain in the plan as and when it is presented for adoption, hopefully later this year. Therefore, the allocation of this site in the Emerging Local Plan carries substantial weight in the overall planning balance. As members are likely aware, 3 other sites are allocated in the Emerging Local Plan in Codicot, namely CD1, CD2 and CD3. As mentioned, the council has a serious housing supply deficit, and these other sites allocated in Codicot could contribute to addressing this shortfall. In order for these to come forward at some point in the future, these sites are partially reliant on the expansion of the school, as they would result in their own pupil yield and their own demand on the local primary school places. As noted, this current application for CD5 enables the expansion of the school and therefore would unlock the potential for other sites to come forward in the future and to help to address the housing shortage. This matter also attracts substantial weight in the planning balance. In terms of other public benefits, it is noted there would be benefits to the community through the proposed enhancements to the public rights of way and the provision of additional public space and parks for recreational use by the wider public. The proposals also include for a significant amount of Section 106 contributions. Some of the contributions are designed to mitigate the impact of the proposals, and therefore these are neutral in the planning balance. However, some of the contributions which mitigate the proposals would also benefit the wider community, such as the sustainable transport contributions towards the expansion of the bus service, towards the provision of new and improved Scout Hut, and the refurbishment of a Berry Lane Sports Pavilion. These matters weigh in favour of the proposals. I now turn to the overall planning balance, my conclusion and my recommendation. I've already gone through the harm identified to the Greenbelt, its openness and its purposes, and these attract substantial weight. Other harm has also been identified and attributed weight. I've also outlined the significant public benefits of the proposal, namely the enabling of the school expansion to meet existing and future unmet need, and the provision of a significant amount of a market and affordable housing in the context of the council's significant and serious deficit. Both of these 2 aspects are afforded very substantial weight. Furthermore, the allocation of this site in the Emerging Local Plan, which is at an advanced stage, and also the unlocking of other sites allocated in Codicot are both considerations which merit substantial weight. Further public benefits have also been identified, which add further moderate weight in favour of proposals. So in conclusion, applying the approach set out in paragraph 144 of the NPPF, as set out in the conclusions of the report, it is my professional opinion that when considering the significant public benefits of the proposals, together and cumulatively, I consider these to clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt and the other harm as identified. Therefore, the benefits of the site represent very special circumstances in this instance, and therefore it is my recommendation that there be a resolution to grant planning permission, subject to referral to the Secretary of State and subject to completion of the Section 106 legal agreement. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Chair, could I ask a
Yes.
question?
I'm going to, yes, I was just going to come to you, Michael.
Oh, thank you. I'm Vice Chair of the Development Committee at County Council, and I was part of the committee when we gave the planning consent for the extension from 1 form to 2 form entry. At that meeting, there was no discussion on housing because that isn't the county's remit. I just want to ask whether it's a declarable interest with our solicitor, please.
Thank you, Councillor Muir. Noronetta, can I invite you to respond to that?
Yes, Chair. Those particular, the decision about the education from 1 to 2 is not relevant to the decision to approve or refuse this planning application or to consider this planning application today. I hope that's enough for Councillor Muir.
Okay, so he doesn't have an interest, so he can stay. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for raising it. It's important, better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now I'd just like to invite members to ask any clarification questions of our officers before we move on to the speakers. And I've got Councillor Nguala. And can you please try and ask all your questions in one go? That would be helpful if you have more than one.
Well, I've just got one at the moment, but thank you, Chair. So what I want to ask is that I see that the plans are to build flats. I think I read it was 2.5 stories, and I just wanted to hear from the officer about how that will affect the openness to the landscape and the harm to the green belt. So where is the position of the flats, and how would they be overlooking the surrounding land and countryside?
Thank you, Tom. Would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Chair, through you. Will, could you just please bring up the proposed site plan? Just to clarify, there's 2 blocks of flats. Although tall at 10.3 metres, they are 2-storey. They're located towards the eastern end of the site. Unfortunately, I don't have control of the cursor. If you, sorry, Will, I'll try to describe. If you go north a little, that block of properties, you'll see the northeast where the cursor is now. That's a block of flats, and then the southwest, so the opposite side of that same block, is the other block of flats. Yes, that's just there. So there are, should we say, what's considered to be the less sensitive part of the site in terms of the wider landscape, because they're on part of the site which is already located between properties on Heath Lane and St Albans Road. There are, I think I mentioned, 6 2.5-storey dwellings. Again, I don't know precise location, but generally speaking, they're located towards the sort of central eastern part of the site. We've sought to keep any taller buildings away from the southwest boundary of the site, where it's much more sensitive in terms of the open countryside to the southwest. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just come back on that or not?
Yes, you can.
Just that those flats are adjoining the boundary to the school. And so the flats would impair the view from the school, I would think.
Would you mind answering that? Tom, are you able to answer it?
Yes, through you, Chair. If you can, I don't know if you can zoom in again. There is quite a significant wide landscape buffer between the school land and the first properties. Again, the flats are 2-storey. They're a tall 2-storey because they're quite a high-pitched roof. but they are still only 2-storey, and they've got quite a degree of separation and landscaping between it and the school, if that helps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, who have we got next? So, Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Chair. Ruth, I just got a question about how we're proceeding tonight, because you said earlier that if we had questions, we should direct them to the officer. But and I have got some questions, but I don't know, should we be directing them all to him at this stage, or is there going to be a chance later on after we've heard presentations when we could ask questions relative to those presentations?
Yeah, there will be a further opportunity. Yeah, there will be an opportunity to ask questions of the speakers, as we usually do. And then at the end, there will be an opportunity for the planning officer to address any issues raised by speakers. And I think if you have any further questions, then you would be able to, that are generated from those speakers and those answers, then you could raise those then. But if you have immediate clarification questions about the report and the presentation, then I suggest you ask those now. Is that, okay? Does that clarify it?
To some extent, yes. And then you also said we should ask all our questions in one go.
If you can, it just helps. I'm not going to insist on that, but I think if you've got several questions,
I'm not trying to be awkward. It's just that.
Yeah. You've got a long list, have you, Tom?
I don't think I can. Well, it's not that long. I did have a question about the whole concept of the school aspect of it, and I don't know if that's appropriate to ask now.
Yes, I think you can ask that now.
I have found it hard to get my head around the idea that in the report, the message that I'm getting is that this site CD5, if approved, would come with the approval for the school expansion, but that the school expansion would be also dependent on funding that came in from 3 other development sites, which would have to be approved in order for that funding to be generated. And there seems to me to be a kind of inextricable implication that what is approved this evening or objected to will have an effect on what happens to the applications should they be forthcoming for the other 3 sites. And we haven't seen those, so we can't really make a judgment on what those would entail. And I find it hard to understand how we can be asked to make those judgments without knowing what the implications would be on the other sites, if that makes sense. Because the idea being that school, in a way, unlocks the other sites through the funding that becomes available.
Okay, so in essence, you're saying that the funding for the school is dependent on the other sites, not just this one. So can I invite our planning officer to respond to that? So if we were to grant permission tonight for this site and then other sites were refused, how would that leave the school?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to quickly mention, we have live applications on 2 of the other 3 sites. We have an application on CD1, we have an application on, I think it's CD2, the former Wyvale Garden Centre. Each application is determined on its own merits. By approving this application or not, doesn't necessarily imply the others do get approved. They would have to be found to be acceptable in their own right. The contribution to the school and the school element is just one aspect of this application. It's just one element of those other applications. They would have to be found to be acceptable in all regards in their own right. In terms of if one or more of the other 3 applications were to fail, or for some reason one of the other 3 sites weren't to come forward in terms of funding for the school, that's probably a question better answered by one of my county colleagues. I'll invite Kate Marr to answer that one, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, the County Council has taken a statutory duty to enlarge Codicott Primary School with an eventual capacity of 2 forms of entry. And you've heard from the planning officer that the County Council's Development Control Committee has also given consent in terms of development control for that planning application. As part of the Cabinet decision to approve the statutory notice, the County Council has acknowledged that it will be forward funding that capital to support that building programme. And it's acknowledged the financial risk in light of those applications not coming forward.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Tyson?
Thank you. Yes, I think it does. Can we just confirm then that if this application were to be approved, it would not preclude the other applications on CD 1, 2 and 3 from being objected to?
No, I don't believe it would. And it sounds like the county have underwritten the school funding, whatever happens with those further sites. Am I correct? I think I'm correct in saying that. That's how I understood it.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's clear.
Do you have any further questions, Councillor Tyson, at the moment or not?
Not at the moment, thank you, Chair.
Not at the moment. Okay. I'll move on to Councillor Levitt then.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got 2, possibly 3 questions, but the third one will depend on the answer to one of the others. I want to come back on the school expansion, but I'll do the other one first because it's probably easier. The entrance to the site from Heath Lane, if we can have that picture up showing the site layout where it shows the entrances, and that would help, the one that was up for Sue.
Can we have the presentation up?
See, picture's worth 1,000 words. Okay,
Yeah.
if we look at that entrance off Heath Lane at the north sort of west end there, yeah, that's the one there. Coming off Heath Lane, knowing that site a little bit, that's on quite a bit of a hill there, but almost immediately opposite that, in fact, I think it is immediately opposite that, but it's artfully airbrushed over with some trees, is an entrance, an agricultural entrance to Codicott House that's quite heavily used. But there's that's not been mentioned in the highways thing or anything. And I would just wanted to check that, yes, that was part of the highways assessment. Yes, that has been taken into account. And the sort of blindish bit on the road there has also been taken into account. So that does concern me. Okay,
thank you. Tom, are you able to answer that?
I'll provide my brief response and then I'll invite Roger Taylor to also respond. If you look immediately, sorry, Will, if you can bring that back up again. If you look immediately to the west of that group of trees, I believe that is the agricultural access that Councillor Levitt's referring to. It's a little bit further along from the road. Yes, I'm aware that the road does slope downwards as you go to the west. This was something that was raised in some of the objectors' own transport consultants' review, which was submitted with their objections. This is something I checked at the time with the highways officers, and having checked the plans, I was assured that the Heath Lane access would still benefit from sufficient vision displays in both directions, both horizontally and vertically. Roger, I don't know if you want to add to that or if I've answered it for you.
Roger?
Yeah, I've just clicked my video. Well, through you, Chair, thank you for inviting me to your committee meeting tonight. Yes, the approach speed of traffic coming up the hill was checked, and a visibility display was provided to to align with the speed of approaching traffic. And the access further down the hill, the junction spacing or the access spacing, it complies with the roads in Hart. So you have got space in between the two junctions there. Is that,
okay.
Is that enough?
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Levitt?
Yeah, I do still have concerns because actually the visibility display on that particular entrance I'm talking about appears quite small actually, but if Roger says, then that's, yeah, okay, I'll have to accept what Roger says.
Okay, your second question.
The second question was around the school expansion. In the light of the it's being used as exceptional circumstances of the Greenbelt. I accept the fact that the inspector hasn't raised the Greenbelt issue, so it is likely to come out of the Greenbelt. However, it's also raised in paragraph 4.3.22 of the report, on page 62, under the bit about prematurity, which a number of the objectors and other representatives have raised. The gifted field on this site is going to be used for sports pitches. It's not actually to prevent, it's not actually the school building expansion itself. That school building expansion is taking place on the existing school grounds. Now, I've got the plan from the county planning application in front of me. That proposed teaching, at the moment, in front, at the outside of the school there are two sports pitches and a sort of play area with a gazebo-y thing and that on there. The proposed teaching block is going on the area where the gazebo-y pitch is. The plans for the new school show those two sports pitches are retained, although moved, and the gazebo-y area is moved up to the northeast corner. So nothing's actually lost in the size of the outdoor space. There is the same amount of outdoor space that's usable is retained in a slightly different format. So this bit of gifted land, which is going to be used as pitches, are actually additional pitches, so they're not replacing existing. That land's not being used to make up facilities that are lost. It's actually adding facilities to it. Now, 4.322 says the expansion of school would be delayed by at least a further year. Now, actually, bearing in mind it's not part of the school building, I'd like to ask Tom, probably to county, probably through Tom, is that if you didn't get immediate planning permission, plan permission wasn't granted on that, would the short-term loss of that ground pitches actually make any difference to the expansion of the school whatsoever? Bearing in mind you've already said it's funded and everything. Is it going to stop any building work, or is it going to create any real issues in the short term?
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Levitt. Yes, I think Kate's turned the camera on. I think Kate is much better qualified than me to answer those questions. Thank you.
Oh no, go on, Tom. You do it.
It's fine.
Okay. So Councillor Levitt, yeah, it's a very good point. As you've articulated, the school currently is one form entry school. It has mobile classrooms because we've worked flexibly with the school to take additional numbers, and they've got some classes that or some year groups which are larger than 1 FE, and we've had to provide them with additional accommodation. As Tom said in his opening presentation, we can't do that anymore because there are no buildings that we can put on the site, and therefore that planning permission provides for a permanent block of new classrooms to enable the school to have capacity to go to 2 forms of entry and have all of those classes in proper teaching spaces. The site in its whole at the moment is just over 1 hectare. It's 1.3 hectares. Government site standards that set out the size of school sites for certain numbers of pupils, say that for a 2-form entry school, the site size is just over 2 hectares. And that's to enable all of the buildings plus the relevant hard play areas and playing pitches to be provided to enable those schools to deliver the curriculum, both internal and external. The fact of the matter is that we are building on the playing field, on the current playing field, and therefore we'll have to replace that playing field. And to be compliant, we cannot do it within the site size that is currently there at 1.3 hectares. The site would be deficient against government site standards, and therefore the playing field is proposed as part of a land transfer as part of CD5, which makes the site compliant. With that extra site, it becomes just under 2 hectares.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to expand slightly on that one, at what stage would that land be needed?
Kate, are you able to answer that?
So we cannot start to build the buildings until we have until we know that we are going to get that piece of land. Once we've guaranteed that we've got that piece of land and we know that site is compliant, we can then build the buildings.
Okay, so you can't actually build an expanded, an additional classroom until you know that you've definitely secured that land.
Correct. And then that site is then compliant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Levitt, do you have any further questions?
No, I might come back to that point during the debate, but I need to hear what others have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Are there any further questions from members for officers at this stage? Doesn't look like it. Okay, in which case we're going to move on to our speakers. And I'm going to start by inviting Steve Woodward from Save Rural Caldicot to speak. Are you speaking for 5 minutes, or are you splitting it equally, but with the two objectors? Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we have Steve Woodward first for 5 minutes. But welcome to our meeting, and your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you. Chair, members, this evening you'll be told that the Greenbelt land south of Heath Lane, Caldicot, should be sacrificed in order to kick off a 4-part programme of overdevelopment in our village. By way of justification, you'll be told about the advanced stage reached by the North Herts local plan. You'll also be told about oversubscription issues at the village school and land available to alleviate it. I'd like to focus on these 2 issues. Firstly, the local plan. 98% of consultees dislike it. Many councillors think it's awful. Some only voted it through to examination in the hope it'd be fixed. Others tried last year to have it rewritten. Your constituents don't like it. Parish councils don't like it. MPs don't like it. 5,000 people objected to it. The Heath Lane application has drawn nearly 300 objections from a village of 3,400 people. On a per capita basis, that makes it 3 times more unpopular than even the much resented local plan. Need I say more? Your planning officer will tell you that the latest set of main modifications provide justification for approving this application. That's not right. NHDC's own website states clearly that this schedule of modifications is given without prejudice to the inspector's final conclusions. It also promises a public consultation, all representations to which will be taken into account. The lawfulness of this application relies on the local plan being found sound and adopted. It may not be found sound by the inspector, and if it is, it may still be subject to a legal challenge to have the plan or parts of it, like the Greenbelt allocations, quashed. This gives you, the committee members, a timing problem. The site has not been allocated yet, and tonight you cannot be certain it will be. Further, as Greenbelt land, you need to apply the very special circumstances test before you can decide to grant planning permission. In relation to the school needs, as it exists now, the need for places is not so great to justify this. The letter dated 9th March sent by HCC to our solicitors was framed in terms of only some children needing to be accommodated. Some school place need is not enough to warrant a finding of very special circumstances to develop legally protected Greenbelt land. Nor could you look at the need through the lens of the local plan allocations in Codicut and say, well, we need the school for future children from the new housing. That need cannot exist until the plan is adopted. On this basis, it's clear that the application remains premature. The correct tests cannot be applied, and in any case, it is right and proper that those who participated in 6 years of consultation have their views fully and properly accounted for by the inspector. Next, in relation to the capacity issues at Codicut School, there are 2 facts you need to know. First, having spoken to the school, I can tell you that there are no plans to expand unless the 4 development sites in Codicut come forward. Issues with oversubscription are not new, and action is only now being taken opportunistically by HCC in order to accommodate the new development. The rush to start the process is to suit the developers. Second, any beneficial additional capacity will be very short term. This is a crucial point that nobody seems to want to own or even listen to. When the school expansion was added to the local plan, HCC calculated that an enlarged school would accommodate 364 additional houses in the village. NHDC's own figures in allocations and completions for the village now stand at 412. Each of the development sites coming forward demands a housing number much higher than the allocation. This means the true number of houses being built is likely to be at least 470. Providing school places for 364 houses and then building 470 is going to leave us back where we started, with a full and oversubscribed school with 0 room to expand further. Who will this benefit exactly? Certainly not the village. What needs to happen is the separation of the school expansion and the development. Our MP tells us there are plenty of funding avenues available to HCC to facilitate this, and indeed they've used compulsory purchase powers elsewhere in the district to secure school expansion land. This would enable a properly thought out long-term plan for the school without being beholden to the developers. Lastly, despite participating in 6 years of consultation, we've been ignored by NHDC to date. As councillors, you have the power to change that. Vote for what is right. Don't be ground down by the process or rushed by your officers. Remember, also, you have a responsibility to abide by the commitments you made when voting to declare a climate emergency. Allowing this application to proceed will set in train not just this site, but 3 other Greenbelt sites in Codicut. Permitting this to happen now, before the appropriate tests have been met, and with the local plan legally unresolved, could not be more at odds with the promises each of you has made in respect of reducing carbon emissions in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Do members have any questions for Steve? No? Okay, we will move on to, we'll move on to Chris Watts then from Codicut Parish Council. Would you like to address the committee?
Yes, Chair, members, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 5 minutes, Chris.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm objecting to these proposed resolutions on behalf of the Parish Council, and I must say at the outset that it's completely morally unacceptable for the officers to put the application forward now ahead of the publication of the report of the local plan examination by the appointed inspector, which is expected later this year. Furthermore, the basis on which these resolutions are made is the test of very special circumstances, which differs considerably from that being applied and tested by the inspector in determining whether or not the council's proposed site allocations in the Greenbelt should be accepted as passing the exceptional circumstances test. By framing the report in this way, the officers have in reality, whether they did it deliberately or not, set aside the many years of community and individual representations related to the new local plan examination and made that process, in effect, a wasted journey. Why on earth have so many communities spent 6 years on and off in a shared plan-making process with the inspector at numerous examination hearings, when the officers now wish to circumvent that route in favour of another route, applying an alternative Greenbelt harm test? Indeed, the inspector went to great lengths at a number of the hearings to explain to participants he was not basing his decisions on the very special circumstances test, but on the exceptional circumstances test instead. And I would have thought that the inspector could well feel, if these resolutions are accepted, that his time has been wasted, and even worse, potentially that his report dealing with CD5 is now fatally undermined if he actually chooses not to include CD5 as an allocation. People in the local community will feel cheated and now lose all faith in a plan-led approach to planning decision-making if these resolutions are actually approved tonight. I also found the Local Planning Authorities Council's advice note in Appendix B to this report extremely concerning. In a 45-year career, it is in fact the shortest advice note I've ever read from Chambers. I'm not quite sure how or why, but there must be a reason. I think that although Council is actually correct in law, members must take into account the effect of approving these resolutions using that very special circumstances test instead of the one applied by the inspector on the potential complete loss of faith in the democratic process by local communities. In addition, and quite incredibly, I've just been sent this afternoon an email from the case officer to Councillor Moody, and I've included in my presentation, which I sent earlier, we've decided to delay the application until such time as the local plan inspector has given a clear indication as to whether he is satisfied that the exceptional circumstances test has been met, so as to allow the release of Greenbelt land, such as Heath Lane. This may not be until the inspector publishes his final report, or he may provide a form of statement sooner which clarifies this aspect. As such, it is difficult to say when this application may go before committee. I do not expect it anytime soon. I find that at odds completely with the fact we're now considering approving this application today. What has changed actually in reality? By approving the resolutions before you, it is explicitly accepting that not only will a large chunk of the Greenbelt and open countryside around Codicot be lost to a major development of 667 dwellings, but it will then fatally undermine the retention of other sites around Codicot in the Greenbelt, which the local plan inspector has not yet reported back on. We have the ludicrous situation where significant harm to openness and loss of rural character here is potentially going to be supported as achieving a greater supply of housing and an expanded school, but which would inevitably result in additional significant loss of openness and rural character on the other proposed site allocations around Codicot. I'm also concerned about the statement from officers in paragraph 43152, and I won't read it out completely, but the officers have concluded that they've been provided a strong indication that all of the Greenbelt sites currently allocated in the plan, including CD5, will remain in the plan when it is eventually presented for adoption. Well, I go back to the email to Councillor Moody, in which the officers told Councillor Moody that this would only be known after the inspector publishes his final report, or he provides a form of statement which clarifies this. We've not received that report nor the statement that was promised. I don't accept that. I think that's completely wrong. In conclusion, and in these circumstances, I believe it would be sensible and right for the committee to resolve to defer these decisions and await the inspector's report on the soundness of
10 minutes, Chair.
And the site allocations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Levitt, do you have a question for our speaker?
Yes, please, Chair. Somewhat concerned about the mention of that email. Could you tell me when that was dated, please, Mr. Watts?
Yes, I believe it was the 15th of February 2019 to Councillor Moody, yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions for our speaker? No, thank you very much then. So we're going to move on to our member advocates who are sharing the 10 minutes. So I'll let you start, Councillor Moody, and then move on to Councillor Fake, and we'll take a whole 10 minutes if you need it. Okay,
lovely.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening, Chair and fellow councillors. I'm speaking this evening not only as a representative of the residents of Codicot, but also personally appealing to your sense of fair play, an old-fashioned tradition, but hopefully not an outdated principle. I hope you've all taken the time to come and visit our beautiful village over the last few days. I have two key points I want to make this evening. First, the village most strongly objects to the council addressing this application in advance of the inspector's ruling on whether the Greenbelt development, as proposed in the emerging local plan, do in fact constitute exceptional circumstances. And secondly, that the village fails to understand the council's continued insistence on linking the housing development on the Greenbelt with the very different requirement of the school expansion. On the first point, we're all very much aware that the purpose of the Greenbelt is to act as a buffer between settlements and prevent urban sprawl. Development of the Greenbelt is only permissible in the last resort in exceptional circumstances. Again, we're all very well aware that the future housing requirements, as predicted by the ONS, have reduced significantly in recent years to the point of where they've been, well, let's be frank, the justification to build on Greenbelt in North Hertfordshire is now not the same as when the local plan was formulated. The topic has been subject of fierce debate at various sessions of the EIP, and NHD have requested on many occasions by the inspector to justify why they continually refuse to reflect the revised ONS projections. Village residents are fully aware of the situation. Such is their concern, they've been in touch numerously over the last few weeks, and they've actually read the planning officer's report. They're voicing their concerns that the report makes wholly unjustified assumptions regarding the inspection's intentions, especially in the statement at paragraph 4.3.152. And I'll read it out. Officers concerned that the inspector is now unlikely to raise any substantial concerns on the matter he heard evidence on during November and December 2020, including the release of the Greenbelt land. This is not the view of the residents of Codicote who virtually attended the EIP in November and December. They are very concerned that NHDC, by putting this application before the planning committee prior to the inspector's ruling on this matter, are attempting to bypass the authority of the inspector. Their suspicions have been given further credence by them having heard via the well-organised campaign groups within the village and the community that the council may be proposing to use a legal sleight of hand to sidestep the demonstration of exceptional circumstances condition by using the alternative words, very special circumstances, without presenting an iota of supporting evidence for doing so. This is a very different test alone. The test alone will allow the land to be developed without it being removed from the Greenbelt. It's quite a separate of the exceptional circumstances test, and effectively means that the planning committee will be judging the development in isolation based on a different set of criteria from that used by the inspector. This will potentially allow the development to proceed independently of the local plan without waiting for the inspector's decision, and that even the inspector's ruling where circumstances did not meet the criteria, it could be too late. This has incensed many villages to them. It appears that it's a very underhanded tactic. I am concerned that there's such a strength of feeling within the village, it may further lead to legal action against North Hertfordshire District Council. Now, with regard to the second point, the specific site CD5, as things currently stand, no exceptional circumstances exist to justify this site for such a large Greenbelt housing development. The school has confirmed at a meeting between village representatives and the head teacher that is not pushing for expansion, but is quite content to function successfully without the outcome. Furthermore, the attitude of HCC seems at best lukewarm in their enthusiasm for the scheme. There are no contingency plans for this school expansion whatsoever should the application be rejected. They clearly do not see the school as a priority. Surely on this evidence, the small school expansion should not be allowed to be used as an excuse for such a large incursion of the Greenbelt. I suspect, as many of you this evening are in secret agreement with me, that the current link between the school expansion and the site development is, to say at the very least, unhelpful. The two issues are completely different with differing considerations. The link between them should be and can easily be broken. Not only would this allow the committee to examination of the applicants to be deferred until the inspector's judgment, but it would also provide HCC the freedom to determine a sensible and sustained long-term strategy for the acquisition and development of the school. At a recent meeting with Stephen McPartland MP, he advised that the availability of government money to fund school expansion development, including the compulsory purchase of the land, is not a concern. He would actively back a plan to achieve this. Villagers are also perplexed by the apparent inability, or as they see it, stubborn refusal of NHDC to recognise that the simple fact, with all 4 Greenbelt sites in Codicote to be developed, as apparently deemed necessary to facilitate the school, then the school will be oversubscribed before it's even built. By separating the school expansion from the housing development, the long-term needs of the school can be properly assessed, including the compulsory purchase of a larger parcel of land in anticipation of future expansion, as well as the possibility of moving to a less constrained, safer and more secure site devoid of inconvenient footpaths. In consideration of this application, I feel I should also remind our fellow councillors the commitment to address the climate emergency. We voted overwhelmingly to commit to doing everything in our power to reduce carbon emissions in the district. The number of houses proposed in the emerging local plan is under very close scrutiny. To approve such an enormous greenbelt development such as CD5, most likely followed by CD1, 2 and 3, before the local plan has been ratified, would surely be an abdication of our voluntary promise real green commitments. As in any village, the Bush Telegraph has also been buzzing about North Arts District Council recent refusal of a planning permission for the building of houses in Nickelford on the grounds that, yes, it was in the Greenbelt. To approve this application, but to many of the residents of Codicut, would appear to be hypocritical. The fact is, most residents of Codicut are accepting of the need to have a gradual and sustained growth. After all, it's the growth that will remain and encourage the economic well-being of our village. They do object, however, to the large-scale developments forced upon them, which they see the village population increase by some 30+%. We have many infrastructure issues, including traffic flow, parking, electricity supply, drainage. I could go on. Just in finishing, I would like to make sure the committee have read an email that was sent late this evening from Richard Buxton Solicitors before making your decision tonight. As mentioned in the previous speech, I received an email on the 15th of February 2019 from the case officer. He stated the application would not be brought to committee until the inspector's report had been published. To confirm, the inspector was happy that the exceptional circumstances had been met, not the very special circumstances. May I ask by the chair, what has changed since that email was sent to me? I strongly urge you to reject this this application. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand over to Councillor Fake.
How long have I got, Councillor Brown, please? Not long, anyway. Okay.
No, not long. Minutes, I should just go. 3 minutes. Just start.
Madam Chairman, rather than waste time, it is pointless me rehashing the arguments that the committee have received in written form and which were espoused by Councillor Moody. Clearly, I am a county councillor. Clearly, I care immensely about education. Clearly, I do not want to see children bust out of a village. But the overarching problem that I have is that when the district council collectively voted to send this plan for public examination to a transparent process, they did so on the basis that the whole plan would be looked at. It has taken an unconscionably long time, and that is immensely regrettable. But the fact is that the end game is now in sight. The inspector has indicated what his timeframes are. It is undemocratic, untransparent, not transparent, opaque, to begin to make decisions on principal sites ahead of that the release of his report, Madam Chairman. I rest the case.
Thank you, Councillor Fake. So, members, so do we have any questions for our member advocates? Councillor Ngwala, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be really clear about these exceptional circumstances, because are we saying that the exceptional circumstances are that the developers under Section 106 will give a plot of land that will be developed into a play area, a public play area, that's nothing to do with the school? I can't quite get my head around this. Are they giving money to the development of the school, or is it this piece of land where there'll be a public play park?
Did you want to answer that, Madam
Yeah,
Chairman?
I was going to say I'm not sure that is really a,
I mean, I'm happy.
Are you happy to answer that, Councillor Fake?
I'm happy to give my interpretation. My interpretation, Councillor Ngwala, is that essentially this is not a public playground. It would be a replacement for the playing field facilities for the non-built facilities for the school. It wouldn't. Hopefully, it would not involve the public, other than through the school properly conducting a program of letting the space and controlling the space. That's not what's being proposed in my view.
And in your view, do you think this amounts to exceptional circumstances, Councillor Fake?
Well, I have to say to you, I've got to be absolutely candid here, the same as Michael Muir was. When the county council were looking at the situation of place provision within the village, The volume of housing was mentioned peripherally, but of course it was not within the county council's capacity to second guess the local plan. At the time, the local plan clearly stated, and forgive me if I'm wrong on a few houses here, but let's say 350 as an argument. We now know, and very shortly after the county council's decision on looking to expand the school, we now know that the developers are likely to try and massage this to something substantially in excess of 400, maybe 450 dwellings. So there's a shortfall, but sadly, neither the county council nor the district council is in a position to demand 106 payments from developers on applications that aren't actually on the table. So this is all a timing issue, and it would all be very much simpler, in my humble opinion, if we were in a position where the inspector had reached his conclusions. It's not the district council's fault, in all honesty, that they're having to look at this application, because they've got some legal constraints on them in terms of timing. Someone makes an application, they have to respond to it, or they're in trouble in terms of their performance indicators. It's not the district council's fault that the inspector has taken so long. It's not the parish council's fault. It's not the members of the residents of Codicott's fault, but it's taken an inordinate length of time, and we're in an awkward situation. My plea is that the committee consider the democratic transparency and hold their hand until such time as the inspector's report is out. Then we will know much more clearly what the situation is. We will be in a state, frankly, once the council accepts his findings, of understanding precisely what we've got to do. At this minute in time, I don't think we do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thwaite. That's really helpful. And the question does seem to me to be, why now? Why are we hearing this application now? But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Legally, Madam Chairman, I don't want to speak for officers at the district council or the county council, but my belief is that they were faced with a situation where the application arrived. They are lawfully required within a certain period of time to deal with it, and I think that time period has expired, and that's what they're doing. So I think it's no more than that.
Thank you very much. I think that's very helpful clarification. Councillor Tyson, do you have a question for our member advocates?
I do. I've got two, actually. One was relates to something that Councillor Moody said, which was about the compulsory purchase order. I was given to understand that a compulsory purchase order for the land, which could become the playing field of the school, was something that the council were reluctant to impose because it would only be used as a last resort. And while this application existed and the potential for it to be approved, that wouldn't be a last resort, because this would be the preferred option. However, if this were to be refused, then of course there would be no other option, and the argument about it being a last resort would actually pertain. So I think that's what Councillor Moody might have been pointing out. And I think also that is it correct that you were saying that there wouldn't be an objection to that from the local MP or other bodies? I'm not quite sure what the
local MP, Stephen McParland, would actively encourage and support the compulsory purchase of a land, or even to find the school a new home, because where it is at the moment, it has limited capability to develop. Once the housing has been built within the village, if that does come online, it will be actually too small. It will be oversubscribed again. We're just putting a sticking plaster on a bigger problem at the moment.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, if I might come in again, I'm not a lawyer, so I speak from a personal understanding, which may or may not be right or wrong, but I believe it's right. Essentially, sadly, Mr. McPartland or any other MP has no capacity in this matter. He may espouse his support, but when it comes down to a firefight, it's a matter for the courts, for senior courts too, not just your local JPs. It would be High Court, and the county council is a commissioner of places. It is not per se, as it was in the days when I was education executive member, in real terms, a provider of places. It commissions them under the new free school and things. So clearly, there are still some county schools, but they are diminishing by the year. And my understanding is that the county council's legal obligation is to provide a place of education, whether it is inside or outside of the county, for every child of school age who requires education. And therefore, they could, and often have, where there is no capacity locally, bused kids to schools outside of the area. Now, nobody wants to do this with what we call children in hand. We're talking about primary age children here, and it's a disgraceful situation to imagine this could happen, but legally they could. So my understanding is that if it came to a firefight and the developer took issue, or the landowners took issue, the courts would ask the county council, are you able to, is this the in essence the position of last resort? And my understanding is it probably wouldn't be, that those kids would be bussed out. I don't know whether Kate Marr, if through you, Chair, Kate Marr has got anything to add, or anybody else with a legal background, but that's my understanding, and I freely admit I am not a legal brain. That's my perception of the situation.
Thank you. I think our planning officer would like to speak. So I'm going to invite Tom to speak now. Did you want to respond to something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Actually, rewinding a little bit to Councillor Nwala's query regarding whether or not the gifting of this land represented exceptional circumstances. First of all, I think we need to clarify there's two different tests here. Exceptional circumstances test is the test for the inspector when it comes to the local plan. Under paragraph 144 of the NPPF, you have the very special circumstances test, which is applied to specific proposed developments such as this. So we have the very special circumstances test before us tonight. In partially answering Councillor Nwala's question, as I sort of mentioned in my presentation, in my opinion, the very special circumstances are met through accumulation of several key aspects. It's not just the school. So I just want to make that clear. If it's okay, I'll invite Nigel Smith to elaborate on the differences between the two tests, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Largely as Tom's described, but we've heard several people sort of using the terms interchangeably. So I think just to make sure everybody's clear that, yes, as Tom says, very special circumstances is the test for allowing development in the Greenbelt for decision-making on individual planning applications. So as Tom says, the test you're considering tonight is whether this site demonstrates very special circumstances, whereas exceptional circumstances is the test for removing land from the Greenbelt through plan making. So exceptional circumstances is the test that the inspector is applying, but we're not asking members to apply that test tonight. And just to say, although it might not sound it from the words used, it is established in case law that very special circumstances is actually a stricter test than exceptional circumstances. So you're being asked to apply a tougher test to the inspector, and you've just heard from Mr. Annington, you have his recommendation that even applying that higher bar, he believes that test is met.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to invite Michael Muir. Do you have a question for our member advocates?
Yes, I'm afraid Ian Moody has said twice that if the houses are built round Codicut, the school will be oversubscribed. I like Kate Marr to confirm what I'm about to say. We've heard that it was originally 350 houses. It could go up to 450. Now, counties' guidelines, which they keep to, is that one form entry, you need an extra one form entry for 500 houses. So the school will not be oversubscribed between 350 to 450 extra houses, because the county says 500 houses for one form of entry. And if Kate Ma can come in here and confirm what I've just said, because I think it's an important thing that we do not take Ian Moody's suggestion that the school will be oversubscribed. Because it
Okay,
won't.
thank you. Thank you. I've got Tom Allington's hand up first. I'm going to just take him first.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, the only reason I put my hand up was I think it might be better if Russell Monk, sorry, Kate, it might be better if Russell Monk answered that question. I think he's
okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll invite Russell Monk to answer that then.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Yes, just to follow up the conversation with the measure for the local plan, it's for strategic planning reasons. We use the one form of entry per 500 units way of estimating child yield from developments in local plans. When we come to planning applications, we have more detailed information, and at that point we use one of the measures of estimating child yield, and I stress it's estimating child yield, is using a demographic model. And I think the report sets out fairly clearly that we believe there'd be about between 0.7 and 0.8 forms of entry from the developments that are proposed in Codicut. Now, what we've actually modelled is, I think we've modelled 370 units, both the local plan, original local plan allocation and the applications submitted, and we have applications submitted for all of those. So yes, we consider there to be about 0.8 forms of entry that will be generated from 370 units. And I think that's quite clear in the report. So that's the situation as we see it from a model. That I'd stress that's also the peak demand, and what we've modelled is the houses in a 5-year trajectory as set out in the local plan. And in reality, we believe that peak wouldn't be peaking in 5 years. It will be slightly flattened because the houses will be likely to be delivered over a longer period. And it emphasises the issue of estimation, projections, and best guess, shall we say. So where we are is we have lots of ways of measuring it, and I think the 0.8 is about the right measure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Moody's got his hand up, and I think it's fair enough for him to respond to, because Councillor Muir put a question to you, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond.
Thank you very much. The school is already oversubscribed so by 0.4. So that's going to have to take into the equation of the 500. We've also got 100 infill houses that have come up since the local plan was put into place. So there's another 100 houses in the village to consider that have been infilled, not just with these 4 sites as well. So we do believe it will be oversubscribed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions for the member advocates? No, in which case I'm going to move on to invite the applicant supporters, Tracy Puttock and Sophie Stocker, to speak, and I believe you want to share the time. So welcome to our committee. You have 10 minutes between you to address the members.
Okay. I will be slightly less than 5 minutes, and Sophie will probably be slightly over, so between us we'll be okay. Thank you, Chair. My name is Tracy Puttock and I'm Planning Manager at Ash Hill. Our planning consultant, as said, will speak after me on the details of our application, but I wanted to explain a bit of background, how things have evolved over the past few years and the engagement we've undertaken. We pride ourselves on working with officers and residents and addressing issues when we can. We've been working with officers at North Herts and the County Council for over 7 years to bring this site forward. From those initial discussions with officers, we've worked collaboratively throughout the process. The submission of our application back in 2018 was as a result of the closing of the local plan examination and a need from the County Council for the land required to support the expansion of Codicott Primary School, which has been oversubscribed for a number of years. Each of our sites are individually designed to suit the characteristics of the area. We don't have standard house types. We want to create bespoke, high quality developments. We've worked hard with officers to ensure the design was sympathetic with the local character. Our architect spent time creating character areas that sit well with surrounding development. And we spent an afternoon with the parish council walking around the village and discussing the local vernacular. Prior to the submission, I also spent time meeting with residents who had joined or live close to the site, as well as a number of meetings with the parish council, and we held a public consultation event in the community centre. Where we were able to, we have made changes to the scheme, such as relocating the pumping station away from properties, moving houses away from the boundary with Hill Road, creating a through route for traffic from north to south, improved boundary treatments to the new access, all in response to residents' individual concerns. But we also understand local concerns about development in the Greenbelt and needing ratification from the inspector on overall housing needs in the district. Now that the inspector has published his main modifications with no recommendations for change to the overall housing need or approach to Greenbelt release, we agreed with officers that it was appropriate for the application to come before you. There's an ever-pressing need from the County Council to have the land for the school to ensure that existing children from the village can attend, and this is the reason the application was included on the agenda last November. However, we listened to the concerns raised by locals and withdrew the application to allow further hearing sessions to conclude and for the inspector to report back on key issues. The school land is needed to address an existing capacity issue. By positively determining this application this evening, members will ensure that the land can be transferred in sufficient time to deliver the expansion for opening in September 2022. Any further delays will only negatively impact the school and its ability to accommodate children from the village. Your officer's report has thoroughly explained the very special circumstances that exist to justify the approval of this application. Providing the school with land enables a permanent solution to the existing problem for school places, and regardless of any development coming forward in the village, is an important part of the very special circumstances. Alongside donating the land to the County Council, we're also making significant financial contribution towards the school's physical expansion, as well as providing contributions to local infrastructure such as the Codicot Scout Hut, the local GP service and the bus service through the Section 106 agreement, meaning that the enhanced infrastructure will be available to all of the village. Sophie is going to outline the planning case for you.
Thanks, Tracy, and good evening, Chair and members. My name is Sophie Stocker and I'm a senior planner at CBRE, who are Ash Hill's planning agent on this application. It was 6 months after the conclusion of the initial examination and public hearings that in October 2018, we submitted a planning application on behalf of Ash Hill, seeking to deliver housing and also donating a portion of the site to the County Council to enable a long-held ambition for the primary school to be expanded from a one-form to a two-form entry school. The submission was made at that time on the basis that allocation CG5 would form part of the adopted development plan by the time a decision was taken, and to enable the school to be expanded in 2019 in line with the county's ambition. However, as you'll all be aware and have been discussed tonight, there have been exceptional delays to the local plan process, which, whilst justified and through no fault of the council, have unfortunately resulted in an acute shortage of housing in the district and a critical capacity issue for the school. In June 2020, Cabinet acknowledged this housing shortfall, agreeing that it would be appropriate to determine applications on some Greenbelt sites in advance of the local plan being adopted, especially where those sites have the potential to deliver key infrastructure. We consider this applies to this site, given land is being donated for the school to be expanded, and that very special circumstances exist to justify the proposal being put forward for your consideration prior to the local plan being adopted. The very special circumstances that justify this are set out in detail in your officer's report and have been explored as part of Mr. Allington's presentation, but I would like to expand on a couple of these. The first and arguably most important very special circumstance is that the development of this site enables land to be donated to facilitate the permanent expansion of the primary school to resolve existing and future supply issues. It's important to note that even without the new developments that are coming forward in the village under the emerging local plan, there is an existing shortfall of spaces and no other sustainable solution to solving this. This is best illustrated by the fact that in 2019, 11 children from the village were unable to attend the school and are having to be driven to schools in neighbouring towns and villages. Although such very special circumstances are site-specific, as detailed in paragraph 4.3.134 of your officer's report, ensuring there is a sufficient supply of school places is given great weight in planning applications, and has been considered to form part of very special circumstances in a number of applications determined by the Planning Inspectorate across England. The second point that contributes to the site's very special circumstances is that the council can currently only demonstrate 2.2 years of housing land supply as outlined in the statement from April 2020. Without bringing forward appropriate applications ahead of the local plan being adopted, North Herts remains vulnerable to applications being submitted in the Greenbelt and countryside that haven't been tested as part of the local plan process and which will cite a housing shortage as their only very special circumstance. We've seen this uncollaborative approach to planning being taken by developers in a number of authorities across England, and recently in North Herts there's been an application submitted on an unallocated countryside site in Royston. To give some further context to this, in a March 2021 appeal decision at Wharfdale in Bradford, a planning inspector applied very significant weight to allowing housing delivery on a Greenbelt site in the context of the authority having a 2-year housing land supply. The third point to contribute to the very special circumstances is that the proposals deliver 67 units of affordable housing for Codicot, which is 40% of the total units proposed. This is of particular importance in this village, where we understand that no affordable housing has been built since 2007, which is 14 years ago. Finally, the weight that can be given to the site's allocation within the emerging local plan attributes to the very special circumstances on this site. Since the officer's report was published, and as we heard this evening, the local plan inspector has now published a list of main modifications. The Council's Cabinet resolved that these modifications could be put out for public consultation in May on Tuesday evening. The inspector only considers that minor amendments are required to the draft local plan in order for it to be found sound, and none of those amendments are in relation to the housing need nor the proposal to amend the Greenbelt boundary at CD5. The Council's report to Cabinet also makes it clear that the inspector is not accepting further comments on the plan beyond those on these main modifications. These factors, along with the fact that the development is supported by all the relevant statutory consultees, mean that very special circumstances exist for planning permission to be granted. We therefore agree with your planning officer's view that when considered as a package, the required policy tests with relation to very special circumstances set out in paragraphs 143 and 144 of the NPPF are fully met. We hope that members can see the benefits of this proposal and will support the officer recommendation. We thank you for your time, and Tracy and I will happily answer any points of clarification.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions? Doesn't look like it. I've got one question. I want to ask about the affordable housing. I noticed that 2/3 of it is affordable rent and the other third, I think, is shared ownership. I presume from that there is no social housing, no social rent.
The 4-bed houses are all social rent in line with the district's housing need.
So there are social rent. There are some for social rent. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for not getting my hand up quick. I was still reading my notes. Tracy Puttock said something. The application was originally going to come to us in November this year, but they deferred the application coming forward, knowing that the inspector was going to have further examination sessions in January, etc. And that was deferred to allow until the issues were determined from the further hearings. Now, those hearings, although they have concluded and the inspector has closed it now, there are 70 odd pages of further modifications, some of which are main mods. So many of those refer to, or several of those, at least 9, refer directly or indirectly to this site or Codicot and the cumulative effect of the development around that area. Yes, none refer specifically to the Greenbelt of that, but they do raise issues that, and also in particular around SP9, which is the master planning process. Don't you think it would have been a little bit wiser just to, as they got to go out for consultation before the inspector makes his final decisions and makes his final spot, do you not think it would have been wise to defer it just that little bit longer, this was extra few months, just to get those answers and responses to those consultations, because it could lead to changes in the respecters' modifications.
Tracy, can I invite you to answer?
Yes, certainly. When the application was withdrawn from the agenda in November, we agreed an extension of time until February, as that was when we thought, I think the end of February, that's when we thought that there would be some conclusions. But it was also influenced by the school and the timing for the land to be transferred over and for the school to then put forward their proposal. So it was two parts.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? No. Well, so I think that it remains for me to invite our plan. Oh, Councillor Ngwala, you're just about in time.
Just about in time. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, and I know this is a kind of maybe a silly question at this stage, but can I ask the developers why they chose this particular site? Because it was always going to be contentious. It's Greenbelt. So why did you choose this particular site? I did have a quick look at your website, and it says that you tried to develop on brownfield sites and underutilised land. So I wonder why you've gone for Greenbelt outside the village of Codicott.
Can I invite Tracy to answer that?
Well, we do specialise when we were set up originally in brownfield sites, but planning has changed over the last 10 years. And as a company, we've also changed. We look at alternative sites. We've got a number of strategic sites, all of which we do the same process. We start at the very beginning and we follow the process all the way through the local plan. We don't come forward, we don't have an aggressive stance on it, but I'm not involved in, I just do the planning side of things. I don't get involved in the why this site came up. Somebody else will have done that. But obviously we are going to look at sites where there is a need for housing, and obviously there is a need in North Herts for housing.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Tyson. You're on mute, Councillor Tyson.
So just quickly, I wanted to pick up this thing about the timing issue, because we've heard twice this evening that it's important to get this done now, because that gives the school time, I think, as Tracy just said, to put forward their proposal. Could we just have an idea of the time frame behind all of this and why it needs to be done now as opposed to in a few months' time?
Okay, Tracy, are you able to answer that, or we might need to do that? Might need an officer.
I think yes, County Council will probably be better to answer that.
Okay. Can I ask then Tom Allington? Do you think who should answer that question?
As far as
would you want to start?
I'll start. Yes, as far as I'm aware, it's due to the fairly long lead out times from. There's a lot of steps required to achieve a school expansion. It's the lead out times, I understand, are already fairly tight to achieve September 22, but I see Kate's turned the camera on, so I'll invite Kate to expand a little.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Our property team advised that the construction timetable is tight to get us to a September 22 expansion. What we would always aim to do is to have implement an expansion to coincide with the start of an academic year, because that's when the children arrive on the 1st of September or in the first week of September. Our property team, who would be leading any construction programme, advise us that the programme is tight to achieve it for September 22, and they would want to go out to tender the project should you as a committee approve the CD scheme tonight. Obviously, if you don't, then we don't have the guarantee of the land, and we will hold until a future point in time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think you've made that clear. Does that answer your question, Councillor Tyson?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, it answers it just in that, yes, it's going to take a long time, but we don't really know why.
Yeah, well, I think these things have a lead time. I think September 22 sounds pretty ambitious to me, seeing as it's already March 21. You're talking a year and a half. Maybe it depends how big the expansion is. Okay, any further questions for our supporters, our speakers? No. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to invite our case officer, Tom, to respond to anything that's been raised by speakers. And then when we've done that, we're going to go for a break.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to come back on something Councillor Levitt mentioned a minute ago while it's still fresh in my mind. It's something that Councillor Levitt and I discussed earlier regarding the main modifications, which obviously have now been published, and he has mentioned that there's 9 modifications which affect Codicot. Having gone through those modifications, my opinion is that those are relatively minor. The 9 modifications Councillor Levitt has referred to, and in my view, they wouldn't fundamentally change whether or not this application is acceptable. They're quite small, almost tweaks to wording in some instances. So I just wanted to mention that one first. Sorry, just going back to my notes I was making while people were doing their presentations. Steve Woodward mentioned that their solicitors had submitted a letter on their behalf outlining that they believe that very special circumstances hasn't been demonstrated because the wording of a county letter in response to one of their letters referred to some children may not be able to get into the school. First of all, very special circumstances is a planning judgment. And as I previously mentioned, the school is one aspect of a accumulation of aspects which I believe make up very special circumstances. Steve Woodward also mentioned that there's concerns regarding the capacity of the school, that should we build out these 4 sites, we'll end up back effectively where we are now with a shortfall. Russell Monk mentioned earlier about the modelling that they do in terms of likely pupil yields from each site. From previous discussions with Russell and other members of County Council, it's my understanding that given because all these houses from all 4 sites won't appear all at once, they appear over time frame, so you get the pupils added, shall we say, gradually over time. And it's my understanding that because of that, you'll have a peak when you'll have less headroom, shall we say, but generally speaking in the long term, there should be headroom, shall we say, capacity at the school, even with the 4 sites delivered, as well as the Wimpole sites that have already come forward. Just moving on, Chris Watts, on behalf of the Parish Council, and I think Councillor Ian Moody both made reference to an email I sent to Councillor Moody over 2 years ago now. My first point is, I'm not sure how that email is relevant to the material planning considerations to be considered tonight. Secondly, as mentioned, it's over 2 years ago, that email now. What I may have said then may not apply now. Plenty has changed since then. Notably, the school expansion has been granted permission, so we have more certainty on that in terms of whether or not it can be considered a very special circumstance. And importantly, as I've previously mentioned, it's my view that because the inspector has now published what is his 2nd round of main modifications, if the inspector wanted to remove this site or any of the sites, it's my opinion and belief that he would have done it by now. I think we have a strong indication from the inspector now that this site and the other sites will remain in the plan. Sorry, just checking my notes. Yes, several. I think it was Ian Moody mentioned the use of a compulsory purchase order. Through discussions with County Council, it's my understanding that, as been mentioned, they do tend to be a matter of last resort. I.e., if there's a way the land can be gained or secured via other means, then you don't go down the compulsory purchase order route. The land is to be used as school expansion, not just through this application, but through the policy and the local plan. So until that changes, until that policy changes or is modified, there is a viable option for getting that land. So a compulsory purchase order wouldn't necessarily be a suitable route. I think that probably is everything I wanted to come back on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I think we'll take a comfort break now, and then we'll come back after the comfort break to move into debate. I presume Councillor Moody, are you leaving us now? Because you won't be taking part in the debate. You
Yes.
can watch on YouTube, or if you care to.
And me, Madam Chairman, I think.
You're leaving too. Okay,
Well,
thank you very much.
it's not a question of leaving, Madam Chairman. I mean, clearly we can't take part in the debate.
No, of course
I'll keep
you
it
can't.
watching brief, but essentially we're gone for the night. We've done what we were asked to do.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll take a 5-minute break now. So we'll say back at 9:30. See you then.
Thank you, Chair. Would you like me to carry out a roll call?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll include yourself, that's fine. Councillor Allen.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Thanks. Councillor Hewson.
Present.
Thanks. Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Levitt.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Nguala. I'll come back to Councillor Nguala. Councillor Prendergast.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Rice. I'll come back. Councillor Nguala, could you just confirm?
Yes, I'm here now. Sorry.
Thanks. That's okay. Councillor Tyson.
I'm here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Muir.
Present.
Thank you. Officers, Simon Ellis.
Present.
Thank you. Tom Addington.
Present.
Thank you. Nurineti Katavu.
Present.
Thank you. Nigel Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Russell Monk.
I'm present. I'm here.
Thank you. Kate Marr.
Yeah, present.
Thank you. Roger Taylor.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you very much. And are our speakers still here? I can't see them. I can see Sophie Stocker and Tracy Puttock.
I think they mostly decided to go and watch on YouTube.
Okay, and Chris Watts is here.
Oh, Chris Watts is still here, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's fine. Yeah, that's all done, Chair.
So we're all here and present and correct. Okay, thank you. Just before we move into debate, I've had a request from Councillor Allen to ask a legal question. Councillor Allen.
Thank you very much. I was just wanting to check. With this case, if it does get postponed and put back, will the new plan be what it's judged on, or if the planning has already been put in under the old plan, will it be judged on that?
Okay, can I invite our officer? Oh, Nurinata can answer that. Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Obviously, if this is, I'm assuming you want, if you're asking if it's deferred.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if it's deferred, the applicant has two options. They can either apply again once we've got to a point where the local plan has been adopted. A new report would be done by the officer, which would take into account the new plan. And at that point, the application will be looked at again with these new because there will be new planning considerations that will need to be considered by the members when they look at the application anew. I don't know if Tom wants to assist or is there anything else that Tom wants to add?
I can do. Sorry, Councillor Allen, just to clarify your question, are you asking what's likely to happen if this application were to be deferred? Sorry.
I just wanted to check if this is deferred and the new plan is put into effect, will the deferment be reviewed under the new plan or under the original plan?
Well, it would depend how long the deferral was for. If you were to propose to defer the application until the new local plan was adopted, yes, as Nurineta has hinted at, the applicant has a couple of choices. They could either accept that deferral and wait for the local plan to be adopted, in which case, yes, new report from me, which wouldn't have to make any reference to very special circumstances because it would no longer be in the Greenbelt, or they would have the right to appeal against non-determination. Having discussed it with, just so you're informed, having discussed it with the applicant, I understand that if it's deferred, they are likely to appeal a non-determination.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, that's helpful. Okay, let's move into debate then. Who would like to speak? Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, just to say thank you for that question, previous question. It was helpful on something I was going to raise a similar issue as well on that. My points I was going to raise were about, I think a lot of the objectors and a lot of other people have raised, is about hearing this application now and not when the local plan is determined. As some of them have said, the whole point of taking us to the inspector was to put the ideas, let him make the final decision, let him make the amendments, let people have their representations, take those representations into account, then come up with a plan that we could adopt, and that the inspector had found sound. As we stand at the moment, because of all the extra hearings and that, and all the delays, some of which I might add were due to education issues that were unresolved by county, and we had to have extra hearings on those. The applicant said that they deferred the November, they asked for the November one to be deferred till they had the results. We've gone as far as having those hearings, and now we have 70 pages of main modifications or further modifications to be taken into account before the inspector will determine his examination. Some of those relate, yes, in some minor ways, but at least 9 of those relate to CODICOT or the cumulative effect. One in particular doesn't, which is the master planning one, which is a whole new thing in there, which the inspector hasn't ruled on yet either way, and that is open to consultation. I would have suggested deferring, but obviously there's no point in that because we already know that the applicant will go for non-determination, which takes the whole thing out of our hands completely, and it's left the inspectorate. That brings me to the officer's report and other things on prematurity, mentioned in paragraph 4.3.19. Now, there's a couple of tests there are 2 main tests for prematurity, and it raises paragraph 49 of the NPF. Taking the easy one first, B, the emerging plan is at an advanced stage, but is not yet formally part of the development plan for the area. That is a requirement for prematurity. That is very obviously ticked box. It is at an advanced stage. We're waiting for the final bits and pieces. So it meets the test in B. Test A is the development proposed is so substantial or its cumulative effect would be so significant that to grant permission would undermine a plan-making process by determining decisions about the scale, location of phasing of new developments that are central to the emerging plan. Now, the very beginning of that paragraph 49 says, however, in the context of the framework. The part of the framework that applies to that is determining applications, which is paragraphs 47, 48, 49, and 50 of the NPPF. 47 is the introduction. 48 sets out 3 more things that give weight. Local planning authorities may give weight to relevant policies in emerging plans according to the stage of preparation of the emerging plan. The more advanced the preparation, the greater weight. Well, we know that from the part B, it meets that it does that. So, but this is the interesting one. The extent to which there are unresolved objections to relevant policies, the less significant the unresolved objections, the greater the weight might be given. There are 70 pages of unresolved bits of policy. Yes, a lot of them minor, but some are fairly significant. Putting that into the context of the framework, my thoughts are that as a number of these relate to the sites and the cumulative effect on CODICOT and the undetermined applications, if we determine this one, it adds weight and changes the view we must take of the other applications that are all cumulative to this particular area. So it's my contention that this is a premature application, Chair. And I would like to move a motion that we refuse on the grounds of prematurity, as we can't defer, or we don't know.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Muir.
Thank you, Chair. Dave is going to propose prematurity. I will second that.
Okay, thank you. Can we, Councillor Hunter?
Thank you, Chair. I've listened with interest tonight, and one thing I will say, I'll thank our planning officer, Tom Ellington, for a comprehensive report. I spent a lot of time reading it more than once. I also went online and looked at a number of things, but I must admit this absolutely goes against my planning grain, so to speak, is that development in the Greenbelt has to have something that's absolutely substantial as far as special circumstances, and revolving it time and time again around school expansion, it does not feel right to me. I must agree, I agree with Councillor Levitt that this is premature, in my opinion, and this obviously, because it's in the Greenbelt, does have an adverse impact on the characteristic and settings and the landscape around the actual area. I feel totally that we should not be looking at this now. This is something we should have been looking at in a number of months' time, because obviously within the local plan, there are a number of areas around Caldicot which are in the local plan, and if agreed by the inspector, the whole thing has to be looked at as a whole. One thing I've always argued against is how local plans are put together. And this is a typical example, in my opinion, of what is wrong with the process of local plans. So I'm quite happy to support Councillor Levitt's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Ngwala.
Thank you, Chair. So my point of view is, and I agree with everything that's been said so far, but I drove out to have a look at this site yesterday, and I stood at the point where the block of flats is going to be, one side of the school, and I looked at it and I thought, how on earth can you possibly want to build houses here? Because they will impact on the surrounding countryside because it's up on a hill. So where the houses stand, they will be overlooking the valley, and to the west, it's all open countryside. So I can't think there's a justification for building on Greenbelt when it will have a significant harmful impact on the surrounding area. The other thing is that the road that leads from the entrance to the site down Heath Lane, down to the bottom, there's a kind of, where the valley is, I assume, water was there yesterday. I had to drive round a large puddle. So obviously water gathers down there. And it's a very tight corner. So construction traffic going along that road, it's a lane, and I had to stop several times going up and down, having a look at it to let cars pass me. So that is a really tight, narrow road for construction traffic. And I just think that the other aspect was that the school currently has an outstanding Ofsted report. And I just think my own view is that if you expand a school, naturally the standards will go down because you'll have more children with stretched resources trying to accommodate those children's educational needs. So I'm minded to refuse because I just think this is the wrong location for lots and lots of reasons.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ngwala. Anybody else like to speak? Would anybody else like to comment on the... Oh, Councillor Allen. I
respect all of the comments that we've had, all of the emails, all the letters from residents in Caldicot. I know that this brings up a lot of strong feelings. I struggle to get past the thought of not being able to allow 67 social houses to be built. However, I do agree it's in the wrong place.
Okay, thank you. Would any members like to comment on the very special circumstances that our officer has put forward, such as the school? I don't think anybody's said much. Anybody like to comment on that? What do we feel about the link to the school? Anybody want to say anything about that?
Yes, I'd like to
Okay,
say
Councillor Nguala.
Sorry, I'm talking rather a lot, aren't I? And if anybody else wants to speak,
I've got
please
two
do.
more, don't worry, but you go
Okay.
first.
Well, I just think that to link it to the school is a bit tenuous, really. And the school's quite small as it stands, it seems to me. And if you make it bigger to allow 2 entry forms at reception, that means another 30 children in an already small school. And we're just considering how many children might potentially want to go there should all these houses be built. And I'm sure it would be more than 30. So whatever happens, you're going to be busing children out. And to bus them out, where would you be busing them to? Because the nearest place, it seems to me, is either Welling or Welling Garden City, or you might go to Nebworth. You know, well, that's quite a long way. I mean, Codicott is out in the middle of the countryside. So to take your children to school in the morning would be quite a journey. And there'd be a lot of competition for those places. So naturally, some families will be very disappointed. And I imagine one of the criteria for having your child accepted to the school would be that you'd lived in the area for a long time. So I can't think that there's any advantage to Section 106 money being given to develop this school. Of course, we need more school places, but I don't think it's going to solve the absolute issue of not all children will be able to go to that school anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Tyson.
I understand fully the issue of the school being somewhat oversubscribed at the moment, and I'm still slightly unsure about the validity of using that as a very special circumstance. And I understand that Mr. Allington is saying that you have to see the very special circumstances as a combination of factors, including the land supply issue and the fact that the local plan is emerging rapidly, we think. But I still think I've still got a problem with the idea of the school being used as some sort of a bargaining chip, you know, to open up this site. Although having said that, if the school is the main very special circumstance that does unlock all of this, then the other 3 sites won't be able to claim that that is a very special circumstance anymore. So that would be an argument against the other 3 sites. So to me, the whole thing is somewhat convoluted and not at all clear on this level. So I wouldn't mind some further debate about what the relevance of the school as a very special circumstance is or would be in the future to the other 3 sites that are related to this.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Tyson. I've got Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. I will mention the school as I brought it up during the debate during the earlier part as well. This part of the school is for sports fields to give it sufficient hectares to be able to tick the boxes, which I believe are guidance. They're not statutory requirements, they're guidance requirements about the amount of outside space and that the school needs. It's not actually losing any pitches, it's got the same number of pitches, just on a smaller, it's just a tight space. It's very special circumstances which we appear to be trying to determine this application at the moment is the school's justification. It doesn't need the Section 106 money, because the officer from Herts County said the money's been the ring fence, the money's there anyway, although it's a financial risk, and they've taken the decision to finance it anyway. So it's not a question of finance at all for the school. Kate Mara mentioned that they need the guarantee of the land to be able to go forward the expansion. And I know she didn't answer much about on the phasing. Could they wait for the school fields for a little while? However, if you look at those pages and pages of major modifications and that, page 153 on that MM227 FM123 policy CD5 actually gives her that guarantee she requires. It says land south of Heath Lane, land to the east of the current alignment of the footpath Codica 014 to be reserved and secured for education use, and that's in red, that's the new bits in it, and secured for education use to enable expansion of the existing school, and in red again, new bit, to accommodate additional pupils arising from the allocated sites. That is very, very critical. That is the guarantee that that school can go ahead and that land will be allocated. That's part of these main modifications and further modifications that haven't yet been consulted on and haven't yet been incorporated into the final version of the local plan for the invested side on. That is why, and one of the principal reasons why, this application is premature. And that is one of the reasons we must wait for that to be put into writing and that guarantee to be put in place, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Just coming back on your point about the land and the sufficient site for the school. My understanding from what Kate Marr said was that they needed 2 hectares to comply. That you say it's a guideline. I think she said she used the word comply. So I'm not sure whether that's strictly.
I'm not sure, Chair. The main thing was about the guarantee of this.
Yes. Okay. Your other points still stand, but I think she was saying it was about compliance. Tom, our officer Tom Allington wants to comment at this point. Tom, I'm inviting you to comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick points I just wanted to quickly clarify, which you've raised. Councillor Nwala mentioned about the school expansion being 30 extra children at the school. A 1 form of entry to a 2 form of entry would mean an extra class per year. So that would be 30 children per 7 years. So that'd be 210 children at the school. So I just want to clarify that point quickly. Councillor Tyson questioned whether or not the expansion of the school could represent very special circumstances. My report refers to, I think, 3 case studies around the country, the most nearest being St Albans, where both the planning inspector and the Secretary of State have given substantial weight to education provision in terms of the very special circumstances case. I just wanted to clarify those 2 points quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you. I think both Councillor Levitt and our planning officer have actually said what I was going to say, reference to special circumstances, but it's how much weight you actually give to the prematurity. And personally, I still stand by the fact that I think this is premature and something that we ought to be looking at a later date. So I'll stand by my original. But I also wanted to say about school planning, having been involved with officers at county over a number of years, they do look at the whole and actually process it accordingly to make sure whatever planning they do actually complies with the need.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members that would like to speak? Okay, so we've got a proposal from Councillor Levitt to refuse on the grounds of prematurity, and Councillor Muir is seconding that. I just want to take some advice now from our officers about the grounds for refusal. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. We're just busy looking through. I think the debate is looking at quite big picture stuff, and I think it would be sensible to you could either argue that if you refuse planning permission because it's in the green belt and there's harm to the green belt and you don't think the very special circumstances outweigh the harm, you could argue that the prematurity argument is implicit within that. But I think it's probably best, because you're focusing on the prematurity and the stages of the plan, I think it's probably best that you don't ignore the elephant in the room and that you start with green belt refusal, and that the very special circumstances are not sufficient to outweigh the green belt harm, so it's contrary to the normal green belt policies. And then you flip to you do a second reason for refusal, you flip to the prematurity argument on paragraph 49. And from what Councillor Levitt said, I think there were 2 aspects to that. First of all, he was concerned about the cumulative effect. The significance of the development and its cumulative effect would undermine the plan making process contrary to paragraph 49. And that's section A that he was looking at, and then he was also referring to the extent of unresolved objections, which was, I think, is paragraph C of the same section. So you've got two reasons.
48B actually.
48B, but I think it was unresolved objections. He was quoting one that wasn't shown
Yeah, I'm looking at the planning framework. I think it's 48B, the extent to which there are unresolved objections.
Unresolved objections plus the cumulative effect.
Yeah.
So you've got two reasons for refusal. The Greenbelt, very special circumstances have not been satisfied. And then the counter next point is the prematurity argument. So that's two reasons for refusal. And I think it's as the decision notice would be issued quite quickly, you will need to lace in the fact that at this point in time there is no completed Section 106 agreement. So you'd need a sort of procedural point to explain that if it went to appeal and the inspector was minded to allow the development at this current point in time, there's no legal agreement. So until that's completed, there couldn't be a planning permission anyway. So you'd need three reasons for refusal. The Greenbelt is one, the prematurity is another. And I think it's important to do two reasons rather than rely on it being implicit. And then the third reason is the lack of Section 106 agreement. That's quite big picture. It doesn't go into the details about the school. It's just you've weighed all the arguments and you've come down on the other side to the officer on the bigger picture elements. I think that's where you're heading.
Okay, thank you very much for that advice. Councillor Levitt, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, if it helps, Chair, under paragraph 50 of the NPPF, we need to give reasons why I'm raising it on prematurity, and I had written something down that covers actually all those points that Mr. Ellis just raised. Why is it premature? It prejudices the local plan. The first one related to the first reason related to the Greenbelt, in that by determining at this time on the Greenbelt grounds, that is premature because it looks like it's likely to be taken out, and that we would have to be determined under a different process, as the inspectors raise no major modifications. So whatever we phrase that, if we could phrase it as a separate objection or leave it as part of the prematurity one. The second one was the cumulative effect on all the developments in Codicot, and the policies in the emerging local plan must be taken into account. The third one was the 70 pages of the further modification. Major modifications are still to be consulted on, and the inspector is still to determine the soundness of the plan based on the consultations to those 70 pages of modifications. Therefore, it prejudices the plan process. And fourth one was it prejudices the plan process. In granting this application now does not guarantee the site will be developed. This particular application, by allowing FM 123 to go ahead, it does, which is the bit about you must make the site available. It does guarantee it, so that's why it's premature. So that gives a gist. I think that gives a gist of everything that Simon said, and of course there is the 106 one to go on top of that as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Your advice, please, Chair. Am I allowed to vote because my internet went down and I was not there for the start of the debate?
I'd like to take some advice from our planning legal officer.
The rules are quite clear. If you weren't around for the start of the debate, then you can't vote on it. Unfortunately, Councillor Rice.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'll therefore leave the meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. There's some vagaries of the internet.
Okay.
But thank you for being letting us know. Councillor Muir.
Thank you, Chair. I put my hand up before David came out with prematurity on the local plan, and I just wanted to add that prematurity for the local plan. So that's been talked about and accepted.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to say anything further? Okay, so we have a proposal to refuse on the grounds of the green belt, the section 106 and the prematurity with all those clauses that Councillor Levitt has mentioned. Proposed by Councillor Levitt and seconded by Councillor Muir, I believe. Is that correct? Have I got all that right before we go to the vote? Can we go to the vote?
Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's.
Can I just ask?
Do you
Chair,
need to? Yes.
Sorry, Chair. I think we have the basis of 3 reasons for refusal.
Okay.
I think the wording for the refusal reason on the green belt is fairly clear, and we will be able to explain the planning terminology and put in the relevant policies that apply to the green belt in the existing local plan, because it's still in the green belt under the 1996 local plan, and then of course the NPPF on various circumstances. So it's the inappropriate development that harms the green belt by reason of inappropriateness and encroachment, something like that. And then you put in the green belt reason, and then the prematurity reason. We did have a reason for refusal in our mind, but then Councillor Levitt did then start elaborating a lot more, and we got a bit lost at that point. We could do quite a succinct second reason for refusal on the bullet points in the NPPF on prematurity, cumulative effect, unresolved objections, but some of the other terminology that Councillor Levitt we didn't quite get, and we haven't really been able to formulate into a coherent reason. And then the third reason for refusal, we can do that as a standard wording on the absence of a legal agreement, so we can do that quite clearly. But it's the second reason for refusal we're lacking a bit of clarity on. Do you want it to be broad brush, or do you want it right down to the nitty gritty that David Levitt was mentioning?
Councillor Levitt.
I think, Chair, that the bullet points are sufficient in that one is the doesn't meet the very special circumstances, and the prematurity one is that it does prejudice the plan process, i.e. the cumulative effect, the unresolved 70 pages of further modifications, main modifications. I think that covers the.
Yeah, so that's it. So it's basically 14.
You want us to actually explicitly refer to the 70 pages of modifications, because not all of them apply to this site. I would go for unresolved objections.
Yes,
and that's the phraseology of the NPPF.
They are unresolved objections because they haven't gone out to consultation yet, and the inspector hasn't determined. So yeah, I'm happy to go with that. If it goes any further, of course, if to an appeal or anything, we would of course need to expand on that. But the bullet points, I think, as you suggested, are sufficient. It gets the sense of what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Okay, so the prematurity bit is 48B, unresolved objections, 49A, the cumulative effect. Yep. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, so we've got 3 grounds for objection, and we're going to go for the vote to refuse on those grounds. Thank you, William. Matthew, sorry, Matthew.
That's okay.
I called you William. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so if members could vote for the recommendation to refuse now, please, using the blue hand.
You're on mute, Matthew.
Apologies. If members who wish to vote against that recommendation could now vote. No. I didn't get everyone on the first vote. Is there any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, Chair, that is carried to refuse.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to item 8, planning appeals. I'd like to invite Simon Ellis if he wants to update. Is there anything you want to update the committee with? I've lost Simon.
Sorry, Chair. No, just to point out that the 2 appeals that are referred to were committee decisions. So the first one was the permission in principle that members refused, and that was dismissed, and the decision notice is there. And the second appeal, the other appeal that's been submitted but not determined yet, is the care home on the top of the hill in Royston. So members will remember that one as well. That one's still outstanding. That's the updates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And so it just remains to say that our next meeting is actually next week on the 24th of March. We've got a lot of applications coming forward, so that's why we have got a lot of meetings, and because of the number of applications and call-ins, there are going to be 2 planning control committees in April, and they're going to be Monday the 12th of April and Wednesday the 14th. So you've got 2 in 1 week just for fun. I've got Councillor Ngwala wanted to ask something.
I don't want to ask something. I just wanted to say, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say to Tom Allinson, thank you very much for his comprehensive report, which I thought provided a great deal of learning, actually. Not that you'd know it from some of my comments, perhaps, but that there's a great deal of planning learning going on at the moment with such comprehensive reports. So I did appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and it's a huge amount of work, yes, thank you so much. Is everyone clear about the dates? So I'll see you all again. I think it's Wednesday, is it, next week, the 24th? Yeah, I'll see you all again then. Thank you very much, and good night.
Good evening.
Good night.